you do that? How did you do that?
Welcome back everyone to another ESO build video. Today is going to be the update to the easysorc for the Elsweyr chapter. This build has been around for a very long time. Many people have been using it for all content, and especially those of you that find it difficult to have very fast-paced or dynamic-based rotations. Now the purpose of this build is to give out decent single target damage. No, I didn't say the best. Decent single target damage for all content. But at the same time, you have a massive amount of AoE, much more than many other setups do. So when it comes to ad pulls and such, you are actually on top form. And also at the same time as doing this, you have an easy rotation, you have solid sustain, you do have your own buffs intact, and you can survive as well. So this is a very all-round balanced build, and you can use it in any content you like. So let's go into the stats first of all, to make sure we're buffed up. We are sitting on 43.1k max Magicka, 18.6k max health, which is huge, 842 recovery, but that's not hugely essential because our recovery is massive anyway, but we'll go into that when we get to the rotation. 3.1k spell damage, which does go up with our bonuses from our glyph on our weapon, so that will go higher. 53.6% crit chance, and we're sitting on 18 and 16k resists if we have our resist buff on, which we will have up 100% of the time, hopefully, as long as you're in the rotation properly. 64 points into max Magicka. Now we're using Bloody Mora food, which will actually give us an increase to our max health and max Magicka. Now you can, if you prefer, use the flat blue stuff, which is a lot cheaper to make. But if you have got access to this, this is absolutely fine. This will reduce one of your ranks of vampire, however. So if you are trying to stay around a certain level of vampire, this will knock it off each time you consume it. So what you need to do, if you want to get your vampire stage back up, is actually use a vampire skill. Now the vampire skill, every time you activate one, will take off 30 minutes towards the 6-hour timer of your next rank. So all you need to do is pop perhaps Mist Form 12 times and you've got your rank back. It's very quick to do. So if it is an inconvenience that you've dropped your vampire rank when you don't want to, you can of course just spam a skill for a few minutes and you'll be absolutely fine. But failing that, if you don't have access to this, flat max magic max health food is fine. We do not need recovery food because that is covered in our rotation. Our sustain is absolutely fine. We're using the Shadow Mundus Stone, which will give us 16% increased critical damage based on our traits. And of course, we've got Minor Slayer from our set as well. Stage 4 Vampire all the way, but you can change that if you want to. It's up to you. I'll go over the passives in detail later. First of all, we're going to go over the main skills. Now, Bound Aegis is from the Daedric Summoning skill line. It's the 5th ability to unlock. It does take quite some time to get here, but once you get Bound Armor, morph it to Bound Aegis. This, for being on our bar, will give us an 8% increase to our max magic just for being there, and it will give us minor ward and minor resolve as well, increasing our physical and spell resistance by 1320. Now this also gives us damage mitigation as well as far as our blocking is concerned. How does that work? Basically, this is misunderstood. People think that you have to press it and you have to constantly activate it to get the max magic bonus. You do not. You only have to activate this if you want the block mitigation bonus for 3 seconds. So you keep it on your bar all the time, you have max magic bonus all the time, but if you activate it while blocking for 3 seconds, you will take 36% less damage. Considering your other mitigating effects, of course, but that's how that works. You only activate it if you're about to take a massive hit to the face and you are blocking. Rest of the time, leave it be, leave it on your bar. Now, Daedric Tomb is the next one. This is very unusual, I know, for most MagSorc builds because generally people don't use this because it's very expensive and people can't normally sustain it. But on this particular build, you can. This is a flex slot, but I'm going to show you where this comes from. It comes from the Dark Magic skill line. You will need a couple of these on your bar to start with to level up the skill line to get to here. But this puts 3 mines on the ground. Starts off as Daedric Mines, morph it to Daedric Tomb. And the cast is instant. So unlike the other mines, which take 3 seconds and then they pop, this literally fires as soon as it hits the ground, and each mine can go off individually. And they can immobilize as well. Very simple. Looks like this. And they pop. So you put it under the target. And if you're lucky, sometimes more than one can fire. Got 2 at once there. Now, they are not area of effect. They are direct damage, so one won't splash and hit multiple targets. But if you've got 3 targets running at you right now, 3 different ones can get caught in each one. It's very powerful. It'll take a bit of practice to get used to, but you need to keep that in your rotation all the time underneath the target. And just be careful where your crosshair is, because you want to make sure you actually hit the target on the nose. The more you can hit with, the better. But As I said before, this is very expensive, so you don't want to spam it. So inside our rotation, this is why we've got heavy attacks to utilize our sustain, so we can use this more often. However, if you're not comfortable with this skill, and you find it still a little bit weird because it's not been used that much by many people in the past, you can of course change it to a destruction staff skill. Now there's two options here. First of all, you've got crushing shock, which starts off as force shock. This will do 3 different elemental attacks all at once, like this, and it will interrupt the target. So if it's flashing red sparks and it needs interrupting, from 28 meters range, you can actually interrupt while doing damage. This is a very, very powerful skill and should be utilized by at least someone in your group as and when required, because there's a lot of interrupts to deal with in the game. Not everyone is close enough to do this. So that's a very good option if you choose to, for purpose of utility. At the same time, you can also change it to something else, which is Destructive Clench, which is also from the Destruction Staff skill line. It's a third ability to unlock, starts off as Destructive Touch, morph it to Destructive Clench. This will do a single target damage over time ability to the target, and it will also splash in area of effect to do extra damage to surrounding targets as well. It gets called a different ability. It gets called Shock Clench when you have it on your bar, because we're using a lightning staff and the element changes its name. But essentially, this adds a stun, damage over time, and enemies here and here and here, anyone around that will actually get hit with the initial hit as splash damage. So it does add to AoE as well, but the choice essentially is yours. If you can't get used to mines, Shock and Clench is perfect. If you can get used to it, brilliant. If not, and you want some interrupt utility, you can of course use Crush and Shock, but personally I will stick to Daedric Tomb because it's disgusting. Next up is Hardened Ward. Comes from the Daedric Summoning skill line. It's the 4th ability to unlock. Starts off as Conjured Ward, morph it to Hardened Ward. Now, of course, the higher the health, the larger the shield can be in terms of its flat value, because this can only scale up to a maximum of 50% of your max health. You'll note that we've got 18.6k health, but the damage shield is 9.3. However, if we get buffed, we'll get minor toughness off this dummy here. That will put our health up to now 20.1k, which should put our shield up to 10. But it scales off of your max magic as well. So the higher your max magic, the bigger the shield. But it will only go as far as 50%. So we're actually spot on. We're actually doing just fine with this shield. It's really, really strong. But consider that your resists underneath this do count towards the amount of damage you take in the damage shield. So although our damage shield itself is around the 10k mark, that will consider mitigating effects based on your resistances. So the higher your resists, the longer it will take to get rid of that 10k. Once it's gone, you will take damage. Very, very simple. So if you're in trouble, pop this, and then you won't necessarily die. Inner Light is next. This is in the Mage's Guild skill line. This is the 2nd ability to unlock. Morph it from Mage Light to Inner Light. This, for being on your bar, will grant you Major Prophecy, increasing your crit chance by 10%, although it says 2191. That is actually 10%. And also, it will increase your max magic by 5%. So your max magic is huge. You've got a 5% bonus here and an 8% bonus here. And you don't have to activate these two abilities if you just want the passive. All you have to do is leave them there. Next up is Mage's Wrath, and this is our Execute. This is extremely powerful, and you should be using this when enemies are low health. This is the 1st ability to unlock in the Stormcalling skill line, so you've got no excuses. You get it straight away when you start the game. Starts off as Mage's Fury, morph it to Mage's Wrath. Now, this will do a single target hit to the enemy, which is fairly nice damage passively, but you don't want to use it passively. You want to use this while it's under 20%, because here, it's like a 6k hit, which is low. However, when the target is extremely low health, this will do a massive amount more damage, and it will splash and do area of effect damage to surrounding targets as well. This is your Execute. You only want to use this at 20% and under. So where we would use this as our main spammable inside of our heavies, this is what we end up using at the end of the rotation when the enemy is almost dead. However, you can preempt this. If it's small ads and stuff running around and you think you can get them down to 20% within 4 seconds, you can preempt it and put it on the target, because if this is still active on the target for the 4 seconds and then it goes below 20%, it will burst. So, to recap over that, basically if you look above his head, he's got some buff timers. You can see that it's active at the moment. It looks exactly the same as my skill, and then it runs out when it hits 0. If you get them to 20% while that's active, it will pop. If not, wait until they're low and then use it with your light attacks and your heavies in your rotation. We'll explain that a bit later, but that's your key Execute ability there. You do have to have this. Ice Comet is next. That is also from the Mages Guild skill line. Now, this is a flex slot if you don't have Mages Guild 10, because you will need Mages Guild 10 to get this. Starts off as Meteor, morph it to Ice Comet. This is here purely for stats. However, I will go over those passives shortly. You don't have to have this. You don't use it. The only time we ever fire it is if an enemy is so close to death that we haven't got any more ultimate to fire. Like, our backbar ultimate isn't ready yet, so we'll just use this in an emergency. Reason being is because if you fire this, it's 50-50 whether it's really going to crit or not. And if it doesn't, you basically just hit like a wet blanket. It's terrible. But if you do hit with a crit, obviously it's going to hit really, really hard. So instead of being risky about that, we use our backbar ultimate all the time, unless it's an emergency situation. The enemy's almost dead or you've got nothing else to fire with. But what you can do instead, if you don't have this yet, what you can do is you can use Suppression Field. Now, Suppression Field is from the Dark Magic skill line. What this does is this lasts 12 seconds. It's very cheap as well, and this will do damage over time to the enemies caught inside of this every half a second. It's really, really powerful, but it's got a massive bonus to it as well. All enemies inside of this, so long as they're not immune to CC, can be stunned. So you can get a massive, massive room of ads, drop this on their head, and nothing's going to move for 12 seconds. Absolutely insane. So you can put this on your front bar instead, if you prefer, for those oh shit moments. The rest of the time, Ice Comet, if you can help it. But the choice is yours. If you've got Mages Guild 10, put that on. If you don't, put that on. Back bar, Bound Aegis again. We just double barred it. We've got 8% max magic on both bars. So we don't need to go into that. Blockade of Storms. This is actually called Wall of Elements, and then you morph it into Elemental Blockade. It's the second ability you unlock in the Destruction Staff skill line. Now, why is it called Blockade of Storms? Because I'm using a Lightning Staff on my back bar. If you use a different element, it will be called something else. But this will actually do shock damage every 1 second, and because it's lightning damage has a chance to proc a status effect called Concussion. Concussion will apply minor vulnerability to the target, but it will also allow you an extra bonus. If this version of Wall of Elements touches anything that is concussed, it will knock them off balance for 5 seconds. Off balance has a 5-second uptime and a 15-second downtime per enemy if they are subject to the immunity rules, which most are. So you can have a 25% uptime on off balance. Off balance has some massive bonuses. If you heavy attack something while it's off balance, you can knock it down, you can stun it, and you can get double resources back from your heavy attack. Heavy attacks give you resources back. This will give you twice as much. Also note that your heavy attack will be 70% stronger while it's off balance. So that's when you really want to take advantage of those situations and phases in the fight. This particular build is focused on supplying that for your group. So if you've got healers that want to use more Healy type sets, they can, and you don't have to necessarily put this burden on perhaps the tank and healers. They can do more tank and healer jobs if you prefer. You don't have to do that, but this can supply it. Be very aware of how the off balance rules work, because this build is actually focused on taking full advantage of that, especially since we have heavy attacks in our rotations. This can be swapped for something else later, but you must keep this down on the target at all times. I'm going to explain what else you can do to change this as we go when we get into the gear. But to start with, this is a lightning staff on the back bar, and it's Wall of Elements or Elemental Blockade deliberately to make sure that we can proc off balance. We're going to give an example here. Instant off balance. Instant. Minor vulnerability, concussion, and off balance. Now, he's immune 15 seconds, and after the 15 seconds is up, although he can still be concussed and still be hit with minor vulnerability, then he can go off balance again. But, again, it is chance-based. But based on the way that we're set up, we can proc off balance very, very easily. We can almost guarantee it. Minor vulnerability is a piece of cake for us, especially in our setup anyway. So even if it doesn't proc from this lightning, it will set up from our sets. But as you can see, off balance is landing every time as and when it needs to. So that is a huge bonus. Although we lack somewhat of single target damage, we do have massive AoE, and we can keep that off balance uptime up all the time, especially if you have 2 of these. Now, we'll stop waffling on about that. Boundless Storms is next. That is in our Storm Calling skill line. It's the second ability to unlock. Starts off as Lightning Form, morph it to Boundless Storms. This will do damage once a second for 23 seconds in close proximity of you. It's a very short radius, so it's 5 meters, so it's not too far, so you can stay in the enemy's face and kind of tick damage every 1 second. But above all, this will also give you Major Ward and Major Resolve, increasing your physical and spell resistance by 5280. So, no, we've got minor Resolve and Ward here, and we've got Major here. We've got both Major and Minor Resistance buff in our arsenal, and we keep it up ourselves all the time, and we can sustain it. We are not going to struggle with our resistances. But again, you must stay close to the target. This can also fire Concussion or Minor Vulnerability, and that can also contribute, as you can see, to off balance. Very important that you've got a lot of lightning damage if you're going to do that. Next up is Power Surge. You want to keep your resistance buff up at all times, by the way. You do have to be close if you want to do the damage, but you don't have to be close if you want to just keep the resistance buff up. You do have to keep that active. Stormcalling again. Power Surge. Starts off as Surge, morph it to Power Surge. This will grant you Major Brutality and Major Sorcery, increasing your weapon and spell damage by 20% for 33 seconds. Now, we're not using weapon abilities. We're using magic-based abilities, so the spell damage is the one we benefit from. But, at the same time, while this is active, if you deal any critical hits of any kind, once a second you will heal for 2.5k, and that can crit as well. So basically, if you were to keep Boundless Storms up, which ticks every 1 second, and keep Power Surge up, which heals you once a second if you crit, every time that you see a crit hit, at the moment you're not seeing any. We put some dots down, I can guarantee a crit every second. To the yellow ones, every single time you see one of those, we are healing. Every time you see one, once a second. Your survivability is insane. Keep that up all the time alongside this. They will work in tandem with each other as well as alongside the rest of your skills. Next up is Liquid Lightning. Again, Stormcalling, surprise. This starts off as Lightning Splash, and you can morph it into Liquid Lightning. Now, I know Liquid Flood does do more damage flat out, but it doesn't last as long. So the duration is down on your rotation, so it could fall off, and it does actually negatively impact your overall DPS. Now, for other builds, you may be able to utilize that, but for this particular build, we want the longest duration from this damage over time effect we can get. This lasts for 12 seconds. It's got a small area of effect radius, but at the same time, it does damage every 1 second, and it has a synergy effect to it as well, which people can take to do shock damage in area of effect, which can also contribute to your off balance and concussion. So, very small circle, lightning damage on the ground, keep your wall of elements up as well inside of it, and carry on doing your rotations. All you need to do is maintain these 2 dots while doing the rest of it, but I will explain that when I get to rotation in a moment. Now, next up is Thunderous Rage. This is our ultimate. This is the main one that you should be using at all times. Starts off as Elemental, it's actually called Elemental Storm, morph it into Elemental Rage, but because we're using a lightning staff, it's called Thunderous Rage, so it changes. What changes to this is instead of 7-second duration, it actually lasts 9, because the lightning staff increases its duration by 2 seconds. Now, this is absolutely nuts. Alongside all the rest of the lightning damage that you're doing, this will actually annihilate everything in area of effect. And yes, of course, off balance does contribute towards that as well, because it's lightning damage and it can proc minor vulnerability and concussion. So you can see here that we are a off-balance building machine, and we are built for AoE. Single target's good, but the AoE is where it's all out on this particular build. Now, passives. Now, Dark Magic reduces the Magicka and stamina cost of your abilities by 5%. This skill is very expensive. We do need to get the cost down. When you hit an enemy with a Dark Magic ability, you heal for 10% of your maximum health, and this can happen once every 0.5 seconds. Now, this, if you're using it, does damage every 0.5 seconds. So this can constantly heal you while it's active, which is nuts. Very hard to kill when this is down. Also, Daedric Tomb. Anything that steps in that, each one of these can heal you. If an enemy runs into here, and then half a second later another one runs into here, and half a second another one runs into here, within 1.5 seconds you just healed each time for 10% of your max health. This can actually keep you up. Very, very strong indeed. So get that passive. Make sure you get all of these, in fact. After blocking an attack, your next Magicka or stamina ability is 15% less. Cost-wise. So if you are blocking a heavy attack and then you pop this straight after, it's cheaper. Take advantage of that. Learn your passives. Also, when you cast a Dark Magic ability, you grant yourself Minor Prophecy and your group, increasing your spell crit rating by 1320 for 20 seconds. You actually get an increase to spell crit chance just for using this ability. If you use 1 Dark Magic ability every 20 seconds, this will have 100% uptime, and we're using it 2 or 3 times per rotation. So we've got this up all the time. So when I looked at my stats to start with and it said I had 53% crit chance, it's actually not. It's 59.6. Very, very nice indeed. Almost 60% crit chance. Daedric Summoning. This is next. This restores Magicka when you have a Daedric Summon pet killed. We're not using pets, so you don't need this passive. Reduce the ultimate cost of abilities by 15%. Yes, we do want to get the ultimate cost down because we want to use them more often. Get this. Increases your health and stam recovery by 20% while you have a Daedric Summoning ability slotted. That is important. We do have this slotted. We do want to take advantage of the stam recovery because, of course, we are going to dodge roll, block, and break free. So this will help keep our stamina up so that we can utilize our other resource pool during mechanics. So you do want this passive. And this increases your max health by 8% while you have a Daedric Summon pet active. We don't have a pet, you don't need this passive. So the top one and the bottom one you don't have to use. You can use pets if you want, but this particular build isn't made with pets in mind. But if you do have them, then of course you might need them later. Now, Storm Calling increases your mag recovery by 10%. This is very important, of course. We do have extremely high sustain, but we are using very expensive abilities, so the more recovery, the better. Increases your physical and shock damage by 5%. We are using nothing but lightning on our main rotation, so this increases all of it by 5%, which is huge. Increases your damage done against enemies by 1% for every 10% current health they have. Now, this was confusing for some to start with, and even on the patch notes I read it wrong when it first came out. This basically means the higher the health the enemy has, percentage-wise, the more damage you will do. The lower they have, the less you will do, but obviously the lower health they're at, the more often you can use your execute, because that's when it peaks. So although your damage dips the lower the target's health goes, it then goes back up again because you use an execute, so utilize that as much as possible. But your burst damage potential is so high, especially in massive ad pulls or low health bosses. You can really do some damage really quickly. This is a very important passive. Increases your weapon and spell damage by 2% for each sorcerer ability slotted. Now, this here is a sorcerer ability, so is this, so is this, and so is this. So 4 abilities mapping out to 8% increase to spell damage. But remember, if you change this to suppression field, if you don't have Ice Comet, that's another one. So that will actually count as 10% on your front bar. You do want to get that. Every Sorc ability on your bar will increase your spell damage. Destro skills. Trifocus. This is essential. Now, depending on the staff you have, depending on what bonuses you get, but for having a shock staff, your heavy attacks damage nearby enemies. So, what does that mean? We're going to show it without any buffs, because obviously it'll look really low then, and I don't want to spoil any surprises. But, if we activate a heavy attack with no buffs and no special stuff, look at the target beside. He's actually taking splash damage. And he's concussed with minor vulnerability as well, which is handy. See, the splash damage actually procs the extra bonuses, which can then make him go off balance if he's got the concussion effect, and it's a downward spiral from there. So, you want these passives badly, especially because we're using heavy attacks a lot in our rotation. The more heavies you do, the more splash damage you do, the quicker ads die. Your destruction staff abilities ignore 10% of the enemy's spell resistance. There are buffs and debuffs in your groups that will obviously lessen the penetration or resistances of the targets, but they won't necessarily be up 100% of the time. So this is a really good gap filler. We've set our champion points up so we hit the resistance cap if all buffs are present right on the nose, but this will actually fill the gap if we need to, which you probably will at most situations, especially when Alkosh times are down and crushes are down and all that good stuff. So we do actually get a higher penetration bonus from our light attacks, our heavy attacks, and destruction stuff skills. Increase your chance to apply burning, concussion, and chilled status effects by 100%. Now this means that our flat chance to apply concussion is increased by 100%. It's not 100% chance to do it, it's increased by 100%. So our status chance is very high. We do want to get concussion as much as possible so that we can proc off balance with our wall of elements. While having a lightning staff held, you increase the damage of all of your area of effect abilities by 8%. Now, Flame does more direct damage increase, Lightning does more AoE, and we are built for AoE. We have good single target, but we're built for AoE. So this here, this, our Destro ulti, and our splash damage from our heavy attacks all count as area of effect, and so does our monster helmet at the moment as well. So all of those are boosted by this passive. Very important. When you kill an enemy with a destruction staff ability, you restore 3600 Magicka. So if you kill something with your wall of elements, or if you're using destructive clench or reach, or crush and shock, or even a light or heavy attack, and you kill that target, you'll get magic back. Light armor, of course, we're using 5 pieces of light armor. You do need to get all of these passives, otherwise you are going to suffer with your sustain and a few other shiny bits and pieces. Now, this reduces the effectiveness of snares, so you will get snared by enemies. This will make it less nasty. And of course, it reduces the cost of sprint. We have a small stand bar. We are going to run it really, really quickly if we start sprinting, so don't do it too much. But if you do, this actually reduces the cost of it, so we don't use up so much. And something I did miss, actually, in Boundless Storms, this does actually give you a speed buff. This actually gives you Major Expedition for 4 seconds when you activate it. So if you need to get anywhere quickly, you can activate the buff and sprint, and you'll be really, really fast. But don't do it too often. It only lasts for 4 seconds. Back to passives. We also need this because this increases our mag recovery by 4% per piece worn and reduces the cost of our abilities. This will increase our spell resistance per piece worn. This requires 5 pieces and gives us a 10% crit chance bonus. And this gives us a flat 4884 penetration bonus. Now, penetration bonuses are very important in the game. PVE enemies have 18,200 physical and spell resistance. So the higher your spell penetration, the more damage you will do. So this is really, really helpful. Medium armor, we're wearing 1 piece of medium, so you don't need all of these. These are minor bonuses here that you don't necessarily have to take into consideration, but I would perhaps take advantage of this one. This increases your stamina recovery. So, again, like I said, we will dodge roll, we will sprint occasionally, we'll break free, we'll block. We do need stamina, so the recovery to get it back quickly is actually quite helpful, even though it's only a 1-piece bonus. And, of course, athletics as well increases your movement speed while you sprint, because we are going occasionally sprint, especially if we pop Boundless first, and reduce the cost of dodge roll. So anything that helps towards our stamina bar sustain, especially since we don't have much of it, really helps. So this passive here and this passive here. So Windwalker and Athletics are the 2 you need. This one requires 5, so you don't need it. This one's a sneaking bonus, so meh. And this one gives a weapon crit bonus, so we don't need it. So Windwalker and Athletics, definitely. We are using 1 piece of heavy armor. Rapid Mending and Revitalize do not need to be activated. You do not need to buy these skills because they require 5 pieces. We're only using 1. But what you do need is Juggernaut to increase your health per piece, Constitution to give us resources back for being hit, and of course Resolve, which gives us a minor physical and spell resistance bonus as well for each piece worn. So these top 3 you do want to get. Don't need to worry about that. We are a stage 4 vampire. You will want supernatural recovery, so stage 2 or higher increases your magicka and stam recovery, and of course undeath. This will reduce the damage taken by up to 33% based on your missing health while below 50. What that means is, when you hit that 50% health mark on your own health bar and you start dying, anything you take damage-wise under 50%, the lower the health is, the less damage you take from the incoming damage. It's very, very strong. So you have a much, much safer kind of forgiveness area, if you like, under 50% from any damage you take. You are less likely to die than if you don't have this passive. It's really, really strong. Fighters Guild. We don't actually need any of these, apart from this passive here, actually. Banish the Wicked. You generate 9 ultimate when you kill an undead, daedra, or werewolf. We will be killing a crap ton of those in the game. Every single one that you kill, you'll get more ultimate. The more ultimate you have, the more often you can use your Destro ulti. Simple as that. Mage's Guild, of course, you want Mage's Guild 10 for Ice Comet. If you don't have it, don't worry, we already went over that. But the one thing you do need, and the reason you want these passives, is because this here, Magicka Controller, will increase your maximum magic and recovery by 2% for each ability of this skill line slotted. As you can see here, we've got a 5% bonus from Inner Light, but we have an additional 2% from that passive, and we have Ice Comet on our bar, and we have a 2% increase for this one. So we have a 4% bonus for these 2 skills, and that is why you need Mage's Guild. It's not hugely essential, but if you want to get the tiny, tiny bonuses in there, that will count. Undaunted, of course, you want to get max as soon as possible. In fact, Undaunted 9 to get these 2 unlocked fully. This, whenever you take a synergy, you'll get 4% of your maximum health, maximum stamina, and maximum magicka back. Regardless of what the synergy does, whether it gives you resources back, does damage, whatever, it doesn't matter what it does, it will still give you this 4% of all your resources back. So take the synergies. Not only are they beneficial to you and your group, but they also give you resources. This as well increases your max health, stamina, and magicka by 2% per type of armor worn. As you can see there, we've got a 6% bonus. We're wearing 1 type of heavy, in fact 1 piece of heavy, 1 piece of medium, and 5 pieces of light. We are using 3 different types, so we get 3 different bonuses, and we've got a maximum of 6%. So 6% max magic there, as well as health and stamina, obviously. 7 here with a 5 plus the 2, another 2 here, and another 8 here. We've got a massive mag pool. It's really, really nice. Seed Shield, you do not need. I know before in other videos I told you to get Seed Shield just in case you're in Sanctum or Video and you had to dump the magic bomb and you need to use something really expensive to get rid of it. That will make more sense when you speak to your raid leaders, by the way. You don't need to do that anymore, because this was just spamming a shield and no positive effects came from it. Now, because we're using such an expensive ability, if you need to dump your Magicka, literally just spam Daedric Mines or Daedric Tomb, get rid of as much magic as you can, and you'll do damage every time they pop as well. It's win-win. You lose loads and loads of Magicka, but you also do loads and loads of damage, and then you can not die. That's a mechanic, again, that your raid leaders will explain in Sanctum Ophidia, but keep this on. You don't need T-Shield anymore. High Elf. Yes, of course, we are a High Elf. You can pick any race you want, essentially. You can use a Dark Elf, or you can use a Khajiit. Both of them performed really, really well, or anything else that suits your playstyle. But the High Elf did outperform on this particular build overall. This passive here, when you activate a class ability, you restore 640 Magicka or Stamina based on whichever is lowest. This effect can happen once every 6 seconds. Our lowest pool is our Stamina. Now, for example, you can't regen Stamina while you are blocking. So we'll just hold block and make sure our Stam pool doesn't move. We'll use a class ability, which is our shield. Stamina just went up. We actually gain resources by using our abilities. This is very, very helpful. We have good Stam recovery throughout our passives, and we get stuff back just for doing what we're doing. So we can actually maintain our safety resource bar, if you like, quite well. You also, when you're channeling a cast time ability, take 5% less damage. That is multiplicative with mitigating effects, but don't worry too much about that at the moment because we're not actually using any channel-based abilities. Really nice in a Templar, though, when you're using a Jesus Beam. Increase your max magic by 2k. That is the highest flat magic bonus in the game for any race, including, I believe, the Breton has the same as this. And this increases your spell damage by 258. The Dark Elf does have 258 spell damage and weapon damage as well, but it does have less max Magicka. It has 1750. So the High Elf has slightly higher flat stats and has a resource gain. But the Dark Elf actually has slightly lower flat stats, same amount of spell damage, but you do get stamina as a flat bonus as well. So instead of stamina back, you have a higher pool. So it's up to you which one you choose, but the High Elf did outperform slightly. Now, the most important passive in the game, in my opinion, is medicinal use. If you make crafted potions and you are using spell damage, spell crit, and mag recovery pots, they won't last as long as your cooldown. Your cooldown is 45 seconds. They'll last about 36, 37 seconds. If you have this passive, they'll last 47 seconds, and your cooldown's 45, which means your potion uptime can be 100% on those 3 bonuses. So you want to make sure that if you are using those, or even if you're using tripods or anything like that, tripods I would recommend actually, because you don't need spell damage, you don't need crit chance because we've already got them in our rotation. But if you are using spell pots, you can of course alter some skills, which I'm now going to get to in a minute to make it a little bit more complicated. If you have this passive, you must activate your potion every single time it runs out, and you'll have 100% uptime on the buffs. But to make things even more complicated for you, since the passives are over, if you want to go a little bit squishier, and if you want to take off this healing bonus, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, you can change this skill. If you're in a very, very good group, and you are very safe with your survival, and your healers are really, really on point, and you don't think you need this skill, you can swap to Haunting Curse. This will do damage to the target after 3.5 seconds, and then after 8.5 seconds, it will go again. It will pop twice. Now, this is also damage in area of effect. It actually bursts in area of effect damage. So if you are good enough to use this setup without this ability, without the heal, then of course you can use this skill. And I do demonstrate that on the dummy, but it's up to you. I would highly recommend, especially if you're new to this, to keep Power Surge on, but you can do this if you want. Now the gear, this is really important stuff. So, first of all, Undaunted Infiltrator Lightning Staff. I know people have been trying to get this for ages. The dungeon is not that hard. It's actually quite quick. It's fast-paced dungeon. It's very early game stuff. But it's a matter of luck as to whether you're going to get it or not. Every single weapon in that dungeon has exactly the same rarity, if you like. But Zos knows when you want stuff. So I think they're rigging it so it doesn't drop. But it's there anyway. This can drop from ads. This can drop from the last boss. It can drop from chests. Don't leave any stone unturned. Make sure you loot everything. But anyway, we'll get into what this does. You want a weapon and spell damage increase glyph on the front bar. You want this in precise. And this is technically a medium set, but we're using it in the weapon and jewelry, which means we can change it effectively to a light set with trait changing. So, max magic, weapon crit, The weapon crit is useless. Ignore that trait. Never mind. We've got a bum trait, which is nothing we can do about it. When you use an ability that costs Magicka, your light attacks deal an additional 774 damage, and heavy attacks deal an additional 1161 damage for 10 seconds. This is why we only have it on the front bar, because all we do is activate it and our hands glow, and that buff stays with us for 10 seconds, even if we swap bars. So our light attacks and our heavy attacks are boosted. So it's not just a flat heavy attack on its own, it's boosted. So that's very, very important. You want precise weapon, and you want jewelry in bloodthirsty, infused, and infused, with spell damage on everything. They do start off as robust, that's why you need to trait change them. Now, this also is very important. Our flat damage when we start fighting is very high, but due to the passive, the longer into the fight we are, the more it dips. Bloodthirsty starts pushing it back up again, so that our normal damage goes up, and so does our execute. So you must have at least one bloodthirsty. These two infused ones increase your spell damage overall. Very, very helpful. Now, next up is, of course, the Maelstrom Lightning Staff. Now, this is with a shock glyph as well to further increase the chance to apply concussion, to then apply off balance and all that good stuff. It's infused on purpose because if you use a ground-based, or any based actually, area of effect weapon ability, which this is, that glyph can fire every single time it cools down and is ready to go again, even if you're on the front bar. As long as that ability is down, whichever weapon fired it, its glyph will fire whenever it's ready to the targets that are inside of here. Now, it does jump about from one to the other, but if you have a single target, it will apply to the single target all the time. It's very important that this is infused. Now, the weapon here is from Maelstrom Arena. It will take some practice to get, and some RNG as well. You need to be lucky. But if you don't have this, don't panic. You can, of course, use anything else you want on the back bar. Don't double bar Undaunted Infiltrator because it carries over anyway. There's no point. So what you need to do is put something on here that has a flat bonus that will benefit you. So, for example, Willpower. Staff is worth 2 pieces. So, a 2-piece bonus from Willpower will give you 1,400 extra Magicka on your back bar. We don't have Mage Light on the back bar. That will actually close the gap a little bit. So, that will balance your stats out. So, that will work just fine. Failing that, any crafted staff that's got a magic bonus on it is up to you. But, the most important thing about this weapon, your Wall of Elements must be under the target all the time. We are going to be doing heavy attacks. Why is this important? This set increases your light and heavy attacks by 1, 3, 4, 1 to enemies caught inside your Wall of Elements. This increases your light attack and heavy attack damage as well. They stack. So, if your buff here is on, and this is on, both bonuses now apply extra heavy attacks and light attack damage. And they stack very, very well. Next up is Groftar. This can be swapped. Groftar is from Vault of Madness. It starts off with 1 piece of max Magicka, but then the second piece bonus, if you have the shoulder as well, will actually do flame damage in an area of effect circle for 5 seconds, and then be down for 5 seconds. And then be up again for 5 seconds, and down again for 5 seconds. It's got a 10-second cooldown, but it starts as soon as the first proc hits. So 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down, 8-meter radius as well, which is pretty big. Let's see if we can fire this off. There you go. That big circle there is Groftar. Anything caught inside of that will take area of effect damage. And of course, because they're using a lightning staff, that is buffed by 8%. So this is very, very nice indeed. Really, really good in big cluster pulls. It's very, very strong. Shoulder comes from the Undaunted chests with the keys, and this comes from Vault of Madness. Now, you can change this out for Zan if you prefer. This will give you a spell crit bonus, which will put us over 60% crit chance. And if you do single target light or heavy attacks, you have a 20% chance to create a beam of fire that gets progressively stronger per second for 5 seconds. If you get out of 8-meter range, however, it will break and it will fall off. It has an 18-second cooldown, so there's a 13-second gap. But this does have a chance not just to tick off of your full heavy, but every single tick. Every 0.4 second tick or so, this will have a chance to fire. There we go. Breathe fire from your chest. Looks like it should be from your face, but whatever. And that has a 13-second gap. That will fire a lot more often than not, especially in content where you are close. If you're not close enough, don't use it. If you are actively using this setup and you're very good with it, you will know that you have to stay close range because of Boundless and because of your Groftar and all that kind of stuff. So you should already be in that habit. But if you are, then of course, look at that. No, not even trying. 1 tick from the heavy attack fighter then. It's very, very strong indeed. So the choice is yours. If you have lots and lots of AoE to deal with, of course, Groftar all day long. Even single target, this is absolutely fine. But if you want to push that extra amount for single target fights only, put Zan on. It's entirely up to you. Both of them are very, very good on the setup, but they do have different purposes. However, if you don't have access to Xan, or you just preference Grothdar in general, you can keep this on. The difference is minimal, but there is a difference. Now, the other set is Infallible Ether. Now, people scream like hell at me for using this, but it's been on the build for 3 years almost, so you should probably just get over it. This is used on purpose because it does damage. We have a crit chance bonus, which increases our critical chance. We're using a Shadow Moonstone. We want to crit. We want to make sure that our big heavy attacks do lots and lots of damage. Also, we gain Minor Slayer, increasing all of our damage by 5% flat out, which is also a bonus to us. Spell damage, which increases all of our flat damage as well. And we have another, on the 5th piece bonus, spell crit bonus. So we have crit, and 2 damage bonuses. This is absolutely insane. And at the same time, for free, your fully charged heavy attacks for 10 seconds will apply minor vulnerability. That's not the same as concussion. That concussion comes with minor vulnerability if you do it with lightning status effects. But this does increase the damage done to the targets that are affected by this by 8%. So everybody gets a buff from you using this. But we don't necessarily use it for that purpose. If you look just above it, heavy attacks deal an additional 903 damage. So the final tick on your heavy attack will do more damage. But this here buffs our light and heavy attacks. This here buffs our light and heavy attacks. And so does this. This buffs our heavy as well. So our actual heavy attack rotation, which we are using, is buffed to hell by a combination of these 3 sets. I've used many other sets. You can use Sorori, of course, if you want. You do have higher spell damage towards your abilities and such, but your heavies will go down and so will your splash damage. But Ether did outperform. It's very, very powerful for this particular build. Now, how does that work? Do we need a debuff on that? Not really. This one can do it. So, for argument's sake, we're gonna. This will be off balance. We'll have Wall of Elements down. We've got our sets active. 31k there. 32k crit. That's what happens when you heavy attack with off balance on a target with all 3 buffs active. So this set, make sure your hands are glowing. Maelstrom set and Ether. Every other setup I've used, much lower results. Now, when you are fully buffed up and you've got your spell damage bonuses and everything like that all active at the same time, you can actually hit in excess of anywhere between 35 and 37 per tick while it's off balance. The passive ones, the averages without off balance, can actually hit anywhere between 15 and 22 every tick. It's very, very strong. Now, if you consider single target, of course, we've got a lot of heavy attacks. We don't have too many skill spams. Our single target damage, on average, on a fully buffed situation, excluding Major Slayer, excluding Minor Courage, and excluding Major Vulnerability, we can hit an average of around 65 to 70k single target, which is really, really nice on a long fight. Short fights, however, where something has between 3 to 6 million, maybe in a dungeon or something like that, you can hit in excess of 80 to 90k because your burst is insane. But on average, in comparison to a lot of other single target smashes out there, which hit about 80k plus, this is obviously slightly down on single target. But because of the way it's set up, our area of effect can double and sometimes triple the potential output of area of effect versus other builds. So it's very, very strong for its designed purpose, if you like that kind of thing. Anyway, hopefully that made a bit of sense. Next up is a change. This is something you can do. If, for argument's sake, in your group, you already have a guaranteed abundance of off balance, it's already covered. Maybe you've got 2 easy sorcs. Maybe you've got an easy sorc and an off balance Templar. Maybe you've got a healer and a tank and they're working so well together that off balance is always on time and it never fails. If, and only if that happens, swap this to a flame staff with a flame glyph. Your job is already done. You're applying minor vulnerability anyway. With your heavy attack, you are, with your front bar even, you are applying your same bonuses. You are still getting the same heavy attack bonus because they're off balance and because of all the shiny bonuses. And because it's a flame staff from Maelstrom as well, you will still get the bonus carrying over. Your front bar rotation will be the same. The only benefit you will get, however, is that the Wall of Elements from the flame staff will, of course, do more damage if the targets end up burning. So this can actually boost your damage. And because this is stronger, being on the flame staff, your area of effect will make this ability 8% stronger as well. So only in the situation where your off balance is already covered by other people do you want to switch out to that weapon. The rest of the time, lightning staff all the way. And 100% lightning staff if you are solo or in a very small dungeon group. Now, we're going to go into the champion points, and I'm going to explain the rotation, which is relatively simple. 72 points into Ironclad to reduce the incoming direct damage that we take. 64 and 64 to balance out a 13% mitigation bonus to all damage types, because they're even. And of course 51 into Thick Skinned, which will give us a bonus to damage over time reduction. So if we get hit with darts of any of these kind, they all stack up nicely together. 90 points into Quick Recovery to increase the amount of healing received we have, so any heals that we do or receive from other people are increased. 44 into Warlord to reduce the cost to break free. 75 points into Tenacity to make sure that we take advantage of our heavy attack return from our resources. 75 into Magicka Recovery as well. 76 points into Tumbling. We only need 72 in here to reduce dodge roll costs, but I want the treasure passive and there's nothing else I'm going to put my points into, so I'll take it for 75 points here. Better loot, and you're going to need it if you're going for the Undaunted Infiltrator staff, because it's sometimes a bit of a pain. Now, we've got 51 points into Elfborn to give us a 19% increase to critical damage alongside our Shadowstone. That's actually really, really nice. We've got 64 points into Elemental Expert to increase all of the damage that we do by 13%. And we've got 10 points into Spell Penetration. Now, in other setups I've shown, obviously you can put about 27 or so in here to benefit for, well, 29 in fact, to make it roughly what Sharpened would be if you're in a lot of content that involves your own solo experiences, or maybe in a small dungeon or a pug or something like that. But if you're in a trial where you are optimized in terms of penetration, buffs, and debuffs, and you have everything you need, then you only need 10 points in here. Because you have 1,320 from Minor Breach. You'll have 5,280 from Major Breach. You have 4,884 from your passives. You will have 3,010 from Alkosh. You will have 2,740 from an infused Turok's Pack Crusher. So these bonuses applied plus this will actually hit very close to actual cap. In fact, barely noticeable increase on it. You can't lose a point to go any way higher or lower than that. As far as the stats are concerned, it's either 18,141 or it's 18,237. So we're going for 18,237. But that will put you basically bang on the nose. Any gaps in between there, especially for your lights and heavy attacks, will be covered by a 10% penetration bonus in your passives anyway. Now, we've also got 47 points into Staff Expert to increase our light and heavy attacks, obviously, because we are utilizing those a lot. And 23 points into Master at Arms, increasing all of our direct damage by 10% as well. That includes our light attacks, our Destructive Clench, our Crushing Shock if we're using it, or our Daedric Tomb as well, because they do count as direct damage. So anything that we're using there, and including Mage's Wrath and such as well. So that does actually benefit us quite a lot. 75 points into Thaumaturge to increase our overall damage over time, which we're doing a lot of. And of course, if you have 70 points in there, if anything is off balance, not only do we get all the bonuses I've already spoken about, especially in AoE as well, we do actually get an extra 10% damage across the board. So it's really, really nice. Now, rotation. This is very, very simple, actually. Basically, what you need to do is you need to keep these buffs up. So your Power Surge and your Boundless need to stay up. Before any fight, fire a damage shield, because you want to use a magic ability on your front bar. That will make your hands glow. So that's the important stuff to remember for your buffs. Now, as far as the rotation goes, we need to make sure that these buff up times stay with us. One is longer than the other. The Power Surge is 33 seconds and Boundless is 23 seconds. So the easiest way for us to do that is to incorporate one of these every rotation, but a different one every other. So what I mean by that, you start off with Liquid Lightning, Light Attack, Boundless Storms, Light Attack, Wall of Elements, Swap Bars. When you come back to the back bar rotation again, next time is Liquid Lightning, just like it was before, but instead of Boundless, we use Power Surge. Then Light Attack, Wall, Swap. The front bar is very simple. Light Attack, Daedric Tomb, then Heavy. Daedric Tomb, Heavy again, Daedric Tomb, Swap Bars. Liquid Lightning, Light Attack, whoops, wrong button, Boundless Storms, Light Attack, Wall, Swap. Daedric Tomb, Heavy. Daedric Tomb, Heavy. Daedric Tomb, Swap. Liquid Lightning, Light Attack, Power Surge, Light Attack, Wall, Swap. Hopefully that made a bit of sense. It's very, very simple. Now, if you don't have Daedric Tomb, or you don't want to use it, or you prefer Crushing Shock, or you prefer Destructive Clench, then you put that in place of this. Very simple. Now, the other thing you do change is if you do want to go the squish way, like I mentioned earlier, which you can if your group is up for it, instead of using this every other rotation and using this every other rotation, you still use Boundless every other, but you use Haunting Curse every cast. Drinks all around. Now, I'm going to show you the basic version. So we'll get rid of this dummy so he's not in the way. And then we'll smash him in the face. Where's he gone? There we go. So, every single fight generally has major breach on it anyway, especially if you're dummy humping, because everyone tends to use Ellie Drain, but we don't necessarily need Ellie Drain. We just need potions. Spell pots, if you need them. If not, use tripods. So, if you are solo testing and you don't have one of the new raid dummies, elemental susceptibility on the target, then swap back again. That will stay up as long as you're doing damage to it. When you start the fight, make sure you got your buffs on, and off you go. $24k heavies on your own. Obviously, the other dummy's buffed to hell, so that's very different. You can see the heavy attacks are absolutely massive. This is why you want to have high crit chance. You don't want those to fail. Very, very simple. Rinse, repeat.
I love winning. Drinks all around.
There's Captain Jack. Streaming software. Get in. When you get to execute, you literally want to light attack execute as long as you can sustain it. Failing that, heavy attack and execute in place of Daedric Tomb. Very simple. Solo, 43 to 46 all day long, depending on what you're using. I didn't have Xan on then. That could boost it a hell of a lot more. That was with Grofdar. But there you go. That's a basic setup for that. Daedric Tomb hits really, really hard. Heavy attacks hit as hard as 24k, and you're solo at the moment without all the shiny buffs and such. That goes much, much higher. Now, if we were to use that on the dummy, the big one, you'd see quite a drastic difference. Now, we're going to do it again with Xan and with Haunt and Curse on the back bar. This, again, is if you want to go extra squishy. You don't have to do this. Having Power Surge on at all times is absolutely fine. You don't have to change that at all. But if you do want to go the extra mile, you can, of course, put this on there. Make sure, of course, that you debuff your own target skeleton with Major Breach, just as if someone was using Ellie Drain. Take into account also that we're not using Ellie Drain. So if you did have it present, our recovery would be even higher. Now, on the big raid buff target dummy, of course, he does have that, so that's a lot easier to sustain on there. But you have to be very careful not to burn out. So at execute, if you don't find yourself comfortable with light attack, execute, then just heavy execute twice on each rotation, you'll be just fine. Piece of cake. That could have been higher, actually. I've got some unlucky crits there. But you can get anywhere between sort of 47, 48, pushing 49 if you're lucky, but average of about 46.5. So that's you solo supplying your own, obviously, off balance and minor vulnerability, but you do supply it to the group as well. Now, obviously, if you do have the original setup, which is with the Power Surge, you won't have the Curse. You will lose a little bit of AoE and a little bit of single target, but you can still hit between 45 and 46 anyway, and that is if you have Grofdar on or Xan. It's entirely up to you. Grofdar's roughly around sort of 43, 44, pushing 45, but obviously Xan's single target will do a little bit higher, but not by much. If you want to just focus on AoE all the time, you can, of course, just stick to Grofdar. It's entirely up to you. Anyway, hopefully that helped. Hopefully that was... Look at the heavy attacks, it's massive. Hopefully that helped. Hopefully that wasn't too boring. Hopefully you now have a better understanding of how to approach this particular build. This is very specific. It is designed this way on purpose. So it's not like I've missed stuff and deliberately just thrown shit against the wall. This has been used for a very long time, and it is made this way on purpose. So hopefully this is to your playstyle. If not, then there's plenty of other stuff out there. Anyway, first of all, thank you very, very much for watching. I hugely appreciate the support, and if you are not subscribing, please do hit that button. It is free. Furthermore, if you want to help support outside of the channel, there are some links in the description for Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, the website xynodegaming.com, loot crates as well. Don't forget there are t-shirts and hoodies that you can now get, and of course I live stream every single night from 10 PM UK time on Twitch, so you can catch me there as well. Don't forget also the All About Mechanics dungeon series is now over, but I've now opened up a new section of that doing the arenas, and there is an add-on for those of you that don't understand the mechanics of dungeons. Every single dungeon has a mechanic boss update in there so you can help yourself while you're in game. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.